Welcome back to the Kyle Olson Show. Dr. Simone Gold is a board-certified emergency physician for more than 20 years and a Stanford University-educated attorney. She's also founder of America's Frontline Doctors, a group opining that hydroxychloroquine is a remedy to the coronavirus. She joins me now. So you held a press conference outside the U.S. Supreme Court back in July. Tell me about what happened after that.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, it was really quite a to-do. I decided to do the White Coat Summit to bring together physicians and social media influencers so that we could educate the American people, because there's a lot of information people were not getting. So we actually did about 7 hours of educational videos, but in the middle we broke for lunch and we walked over to the Supreme Court and had a press conference. And you heard the press conference, but of course I did not know that we were going to have such a reaction. I'm told there was almost 20 million views in 6 to 8 hours, and then we were deplatformed everywhere, and then everything kind of exploded.
So what was your experience being deplatformed after you're giving your medical opinion?
I knew that censorship existed in our country. I've seen it. I've directly witnessed it. I know that there's a lot of bias, but it was astonishing that all platforms simultaneously took us down. For one thing, they're supposed to be competitive with each other. There's YouTube, Facebook, Google, Instagram, and LinkedIn all took us down. Also, my own website, which was hosted on Squarespace, which is not a social media platform, also took us down. That means there's such a coordination of activities that I actually didn't know existed.
And so this is what I don't understand. You're a degreed, licensed medical professional giving your educated opinion. You're not somebody sitting in your basement spouting crazy theories into your webcam for 15 people, which, by the way, is allowed under the First Amendment. But your medical opinion is based on research, experience, and science. Other medical professionals may disagree with you, and that's okay as long as it's rooted in those same things. When did Twitter and Facebook become medical experts? Who made them the arbiters of what's disinformation about the coronavirus?
Right. So they've made themselves the arbiters. It turns out that 2 days after our press conference, there was a hearing in Congress on big tech censorship. It was coincidental. It had been postponed till that day. So Mark Zuckerberg was actually in Washington testifying, and he was asked many questions about why he himself, his company, took down our videos. So he answered on point. And he said that we were spreading disinformation. And I say back to him, what medical school did you go to? What residency did you participate in? And what patients have you treated? Because who are you to say what I can say about my own medical experience and knowledge?
So Facebook and I believe Twitter as well, they say that they're relying on the WHO for their medical information. And so if someone says something on their platform that is contrary to what the WHO says, then they, will delete that or they'll ban that person or whatever. Why is that significant?
Okay, let's just pause and let that register. That is so insane. I've heard them say that. When did we get to be the point that we are listening to the WHO as to what Americans can hear in their own nation? It's insane on its face. And by the way, not only is the WHO particularly corrupt, all right, they don't have a free speech clause or amendment like we do, but not only they're particularly corrupt, they've changed their mind over the periods. And when they change their mind, then YouTube and Facebook allows us to say that. That's insane. It's happened to us many times.
So you say the FCC should revoke Section 230 immunity for the social media companies. What exactly does that mean?
So when you publish, like Breitbart, for example, if you function as a publisher, you have to be careful that what you say is true or, hopefully close to the truth, or that you've done due diligence to discover if it's the truth. That's the job of the publisher. You can't just go out and publish something that's completely false and made up and defame somebody. It just can't do it. I'm sorry, you can do it, but you are liable to the person you've injured for money damages. The other option in life is to be a platform or just kind of a neutral conduit, like a highway or a freeway or a telephone company, and just transmit the information from place A to place B. You can be one or you can be the other. You're either responsible for the content or you're not responsible for the content. If you're responsible for the content, you owe damages if you injure someone. If you're not responsible, then you're simply a platform. The advantage to being a platform is you're not liable. So Google and YouTube have petitioned Congress to request that their status be platform. As a platform, they have a huge financial advantage over publishers. It's actually competitively unfair. It's unfair to Breitbart. It's also unfair to the New York Times, right? They need to pick a side. They need to either be the neutral platform like AT&T or like the highway, get you from point A to point B, or they need to be the publisher and be liable for the content. When they censor content, they have declared themselves to be publishers.
So then someone in your position who has been deplatformed by someone who's acting as a publisher, what can then your remedy be?
This is where it gets complicated. Our First Amendment rights apply to citizens against the government. The government has to allow us free speech. So the argument has been that private companies don't have to allow free speech. It's their own private business. To that I say there's a complete monopoly on information. We've never had the situation in the history of the world where a few companies control all of the information in the world. That situation is inherently unstable, especially if you want to run a democracy. So essentially there is no way to have a democracy if the companies that are controlling speech are bigger than the government. So I think that the law needs to catch up with this, and the law needs to apply our First Amendment rights to entities even bigger than the government, such as the private platforms, or better yet, we need to break up the private platforms because they're too big. And it actually legally, I don't understand how they haven't been charged with antitrust violations. Antitrust violations kick in, I think, at around 20 or 25%. Don't quote me on that. But when you have 20 or 25% of market share, it's considered such an overwhelming advantage that it hinders competition. So it seems very obvious to me that these companies need to be broken up. And I really hope that we start working on that.
So do you think this is that reform? Is that a function of the Congress? Is that a function of the FCC or both? How do you view that?
Well, first of all, we need to revoke Privilege 230, right? Because as soon as they have financial penalty for doing what they're doing, they might then change. But Congress needs to we need to break up the companies. They need to start competing with each other. If they start competing with each other, this ship will right itself. But
don't you think Facebook and Twitter would argue that they are competing with each other?
Oh, they're clearly not. And I think that's what my case is going to bring out. All of these companies deplatformed me within an hour. That could not have happened by accident. They obviously were communicating.
And you take the case of others who have been deplatformed. Laura Loomer is, I think, a good example, where she has been deplatformed by her bank, which I didn't realize that that's even a thing. But you're right. You see these various individuals or organizations, and it's like within just a number of hours, they're just, deplatformed by a number of different companies. And you sort of sit back and you say, it just seems to me like there's some coordination. I don't know if it's the companies working together. I don't know if these various left-wing organizations that, want to shut people down, if they are doing some sort of activism campaign towards these companies all at the same time. I don't know what the issue is, but it just seems to me like there clearly is coordination going on. Do you think, though, that the Congress will get serious about this?
So there's a couple things I want to say before I get to Congress. I was stunned. There's obviously coordination. Everyone came down within about an hour. That cannot happen in a normal competitive environment. I also want to say that I forgot to mention that PayPal also held onto my funds for a long time. They eventually released them. But the reason I remembered it is because Candace Owens had done a GoFundMe. And I forgot who the company was. I don't want to say if it GoFundMe if it wasn't. But they wouldn't actually give her the money. So they were putting their own 2 cents. They're putting their finger on the scale. I believe that if we take the House, that we have a shot at breaking up big tech. I will tell you that when this happened to the doctors, even members of Congress were stunned. We met with many members of Congress that week, and they were really surprised. Many of them knew people who knew people who knew our doctors or themselves had patients or family members that needed hydroxychloroquine who couldn't get hydroxychloroquine. But they knew we were very mainstream doctors talking mainstream medicine, and they couldn't believe the rapidity with which we were shut down. And I think the fact that they had a big tech censorship meeting in Congress that week really helped highlight it. I do think Congress will act on this, but they need to have a majority in the House.
Dr. Simone Gold, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.
This is the Kyle Olson Show. We'll be right back.